Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast. We are in the story of David's most well-known failure. We've seen that God's not done with us even when we fall. What we're going to do here is we're going to do a kind of forensic study of David's failure, because what we're going to learn is how to avoid failure in our life by just doing an analysis of the steps that David took to fall. I hear this statement often as a pastor. Wow, pastor, I just fell into sin. Well, you may mean that with the purest of intentions, but the reality is you don't fall into sin. You step into sin one step at a time. And what we see in David's failure is he didn't fall into this immorality. He really got there one step at a time. And so I often see these same three steps inside of my own personal life. Anytime I do something and I go, what was I thinking? I regret that. And I see this in everybody else's life as a pastor. So 3 steps to failure so we can learn how not to fail. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1, and it happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel. And they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, and David remained at Jerusalem. Step number 1 to failure is to avoid the battles. So again, step number 1 to failure is avoid the battle. See, like in the springtime of the year for kings, it's what you did. You went out to battle. It's like, football season or baseball season as Americans. It's just what you do in that time of year. And as kings, you went out and you strengthened your territory and, took back land that maybe it was taken back, and, you asserted yourself. It's what you did. Now, we as Christ followers, we are in a spiritual battle. We're in a spiritual warfare. The kingdom of heaven suffers violence, and the violent take it by force. Leadership is a constant battle for gaining ground and expanding your business and whatever it is you set your sights on. So one step to begin a decline into failure is to take a break from the battles that we should be fighting. David was 50 years of age when he had this major failure. He wasn't 22, he was 50. And what we tend to see inside of our life is we reach a level of success, we start to reach a level of comfort. Man, I've been serving God 15 years now. I've been a volunteer in the church for 10 years, and I've been leading Bible studies. I'm just going to kind of take a break. I'm going to sit back. Now, I believe in taking a Sabbath rest. The Bible does talk about that. There's times to take your vacation, to get away, to recharge. There's times for a spiritual renewal and sabbatical. But then there's a time to get your cute little butt back to the battle, because it's those who prolong that recreational time that often become most susceptible to temptation. When we look at Noah, he didn't get drunk while he was building the ark for 120 years. He didn't get drunk while he was floating around and bobbing out there in the boat for almost a year. What happened? It was after he had success. It was after, he rested from all the battle and all the building that he became susceptible, got drunk, exposed himself, and experienced some negative consequences from that. And what you'll continually see is it's often our success that becomes our greatest threat and enemy to future success. There are 32 NFL teams in the football leagues, American football leagues, and there only have been 7 of the 32 teams that have ever had a back-to-back win in terms of the Super Bowls. So there's 25 teams that have never won a back-to-back Super Bowl. Statistically, it's very hard because we tend to get comfortable. We tend to go, man, I was a success yesterday, therefore I'm going to assume I'm going to be a success today. So get back into battle. Maybe for you've stopped reading leadership books. Get back into reading. Maybe for you, it's I've just stopped serving. I've stopped volunteering. I've been there, done that. You know what? Maybe it's time to get back in your church and start volunteering again. Second step, 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 2. Then it happened one evening that when David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold. Step number 2, walk the edge of the ledge. Now, I have a suspicion that David wasn't completely unaware that rooftops in the cool of the evening were places where people might be out bathing, and chances are this wasn't the first time he was aware of where Bathsheba's house is and where she might have been bathing. And what he did is he walked to the edge of the ledge. And what this tends to be inside of someone's life when they're susceptible to temptation, it's like, well, you know what? It's just a little Skinamax. I'm mature enough to handle that show. And you know what? I can say no to that. And we put ourselves in these vulnerable, susceptible situations, whether it's the company we're keeping, the places that we're going, the entertainment choices we're making, not appropriate sites that we should be going to. And we just kind of go, just take a little look. I'll just take a little peek. It's no harm. It's just, and what you'll always find is it's a very slippery slope from there. In California, up in the Sierra Nevadas, they would have these really large mountains, and it was fun to always go climb these mountains. Well, on some of these mountains, they'd have what's called shale. They'd have these really fine rocks, and there would be just this whole side of this mountain would be covered with shale. And you would start to walk down the hill, and then all the rocks would begin to slide out from under your feet. And you thought you were in control, but before you knew it, you would just be avalanching on down this hill of shale. And unfortunately, I never got hurt. But what I realized is that's just a little step. Oh, it's just a little bit. And then all of a sudden, man, your feet are just taken out from under you and you're just swept under the undertow and taken to places you don't want to be. So why not just go ahead and avoid the edge of the ledge? There are just places we shouldn't even go. Proverbs talks about the seductress and the man getting sucked into immoral temptation. The psalmist, the author of that chapter, who is most likely Solomon, says, don't even go near the door of that house. And so again, we're being reminded, just avoid it in its entirety. If you struggle with alcohol, just don't go sit with your friends at the bar. Whatever your temptations are, be very careful to avoid the edge of the ledge. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 3, so then David sent and inquired about the woman, and someone said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Elam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So what we begin to see as he walked the edge of the ledge, he moved to the third, which is usually the final and fatal step to falling, and that is making provision for the flesh. He did a little more investigating. He got a little more of the facts. He got a little bit closer to the situation, and he succumbed, and he carried a lifetime of pain and regret from that. So let's just not make provision for the flesh. Let's just keep that temptation as far from us as we can. It's not how close can I get to this temptation and not fall. It's how close can I get to Jesus? Just how close and how much of Jesus can I have? Romans 13:4 reminds us, but put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to fulfill its lusts thereof. All right, we're going to pick up and continue. In this story, we're going to see some very encouraging things, again, about how do we get back on track when we do fall.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.